Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Amit Sharma. Amit is a PhD candidate in management and organizations at the Gustavson School of Business, University of Victoria. Today, we will discuss his PhD research exploring the interaction of organization theory in the artisan industry. It's a pleasure to have you on my show, Amit.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's an absolute pleasure to be on your show. Thank you.
Amit, you have experience with the handloom, weaving, and crafts industry in India.
Yeah.
How did that industry experience shape your academic journey?
That's a great question to start, David. And I would say that uh, my experience with the craft industry in India has been nothing short of transformative because it not only gave me an idea or a perspective of how the socially underprivileged sections of the country work and what are the challenges that they are facing. But at the same time, it also gave me an idea of how the businesses can chip in and take and elevate that craft to the next level. So I would say it is a transformative experience for me. And in my case, I come from a very different background. So my education has been in law and finance, and my previous experience in industry had been with different companies, big corporations in US and in India, and looking at the numbers all the time, crunching financial figures and coming up with reports and all those things were pretty exciting. But then soon I realized that probably there is something that was missing there,
Yeah.
and then I decided to move back to India and start my, I would say it's a more of a social venture where I got a chance to interact with the artisans and the people working in different craft industries. And we saw ourselves as a catalyst who can help them grow their businesses, take them to the new markets, and understand the perspectives of the buyers, which normally they don't understand. So this is how we started, and what I felt was that working with craftspeople allowed me to combine so many different aspects of what I had been doing. So it was bringing in my understanding of finance, my understanding of business into a field which works very differently from finance, which works very differently from legal and corporate legal side. So it had a huge influence, and it actually changed the way I was looking at the businesses, because now we are not talking about profit as the sole motive of the businesses. We are talking about people who are, you would we I was surprised how much effort and how much sacrifices they were putting in just to make sure that the craft that they are so passionate about, it survived. So for me, it was not just about craft, it was just about a whole way of approaching the work.
Yeah.
And it was transformative for me.
Yeah.
100%. That's what I would say.
Wonderful. I just wanted to ask you, because you grew up in Rajasthan, that's where your home state back in India, and I know that they are known for very strong cultural crafts background and their clothes. Does it influence you growing up there, your interest in this particular industry?
What I feel that in India there are so many different clusters and pockets, and it's so rich in different kind of traditions, different kind of crafts. So it is very difficult to pick one. So growing up in Rajasthan, we used to see different forms of craft all around us,
Yeah.
be it hand-woven fabrics, be it toys made of wood, be it other traditional art forms. So it was always there. And sometimes what happens is that when you see it all around you, you kind of take it for granted that this is the way it should be. This is the way it is.
Yeah.
But when I started to look at it from more from a business and a social venture point of view, I realized that there are challenges and there are problems that these artisans face. We think of it as a product, but we don't see the process that goes behind that product. And growing up in that environment, having good idea of what the products are. But now once you start understanding the process, it gives you very different meaning to what's happening in the product in front of you. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it had a huge influence on me, coming from a place which is so rich
Mm.
in traditions, which is so rich in different kind of crafts.
Yeah.
And I think it has influenced me even in my research journey as well. So definitely yes.
Wonderful. Based on your experience, what are some of the challenges artisans face today?
I would say that some of the challenges that the artisans face today are having their craft survive, or just to make sure that their craft survive,
Mm,
right? So they are facing this huge challenge from industrialized products.
mm,
And you would know that
mm,
if you look at the history of the craft, even before industrial revolution, there was nothing called craft.
mm,
Everything was being done in a way as it
mm,
was what we call craft today. It was
mm.
all about professions there. So there
Yeah.
were there were ironsmiths, there were people
Yeah.
who were making clothes, and they were doing their profession. They were engaged in their profession. They were doing what
Yeah.
they were good at.
Mm,
And then after the Industrial Revolution, then we started looking at these things as an
mm,
antithesis to
mm,
what the industrial modes of production are.
mm,
So craftspeople are facing this direct challenge from the industrial productions where they need
mm,
to justify
mm,
why what they are doing is relevant,
mm,
why they are doing is something that should be considered important, and
mm,
why people should be willing to pay a price that they
mm,
are asking for that product based on the work that goes
mm.
into it. So
Yeah.
it's not about just the product, but it's
Mm,
also about the culture, the identity, and
mm,
the community that is
mm,
engaged in that craft. So
mm.
when you talk about challenges,
Yeah.
first thing is how they can make sure that their craft is relevant today.
Mm,
The second challenge that I see that the craftsmen face is that how do they get out of this vicious cycle of low growth, low investment,
mm,
low production,
mm.
and then low demand, and then time passes, something new comes up,
Yeah.
and then they are again struggling to retain the relevance of their craft.
Mm,
So one of the biggest challenge that I've seen myself facing the craft people is how do they maintain their authenticity and still try
mm.
to grow, try
Yeah.
to grow their business.
Yeah.
So I would give you a very interesting anecdote when
Mm,
we were working in the field, and we were trying to connect these craftspeople with the buyers outside. We were trying to bridge that gap
mhm,
between what the consumers wanted and what they had an idea of their craft. And there was
mm,
always a middle ground that we could see, but neither the craftsmen could see that part, neither the buyers of their or the consumers of their craft could see that thing. And which was the language that they speak. The
mm,
design language that the buyers wanted was very
mm,
different. The design
mm,
language that the craftsmen had was so rooted in tradition that
mm,
it was very difficult for them to think out of that
mm,
box.
mm,
So one of the instances that happened with us, that we got a big, or I would not name the retailer, but we got an inquiry from one of the big retail chains in US, and they wanted about 5,000 meters of fabric.
mm,
Now, when we were having this conversation, I said that okay, we can definitely involve more artisans into this thing, but then we would need time. They
mhm,
said okay, no, we don't have time. I said that okay, then what we can do, we can, instead of using probably organic dyes, we can use low impact chemical dyes so that we
mm.
can save some time on the dyeing process.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. We are looking for organic dyes. Okay, then I said, okay, why not? Why don't we? If you have this time constraint, then and it's probably going to take 6 months for us to manufacture that kind of quantity.
Yeah.
And they said that okay, no, we don't have that much time because we are in the fashion industry and the fashion changes so fast. So we
Mm,
have our a line coming up pretty soon, and we need the production for that. I said, okay, why can we change? Can we change the yarn that goes into it rather than using an hand spun yarn? Can we use a
mm,
machine made yarn? Because
mm,
it will be woven on the hand loom, but the
mhm,
yarn that we are using would be different.
mm,
No, no, no. We are looking for hand spun yarn only.
Wow.
So then the whole challenge was then
Yeah.
how much can you change
Yeah.
and still retain the authenticity of the product? Because the answer
Yeah.
that came from them was that if we change these many things, it's not the same thing that we are ordering.
Yeah.
So that is the confusion between, or that's the tension that I
Yeah.
saw, that
Yeah.
from the craftsman's point of view, they
Yeah.
are sticking to their craft. There is certain way of
Mm.
doing that thing. There is
Yeah.
certain method.
Yeah.
And if you follow that method, it
Yeah.
takes time. It cannot compete with industrial ways of manufacturing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you look at from the producer's point of view, they
Yeah.
are looking at it as a product that can be made in a very
Yeah.
similar way, maybe, or in a
Mm.
less time. They don't understand the complexities that are involved.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is always this growth and authenticity tension, that
Yeah.
how do craftsmen maintain the authenticity of their product and still retain the core essence of the craft. And that was something that intrigued me. And
Yeah.
that's how this journey started, that
Yeah.
there are some tensions,
Mm.
and we need to know more about this thing. So
Yeah.
that was something that I found very interesting.
Yeah.
And these are the challenges that the craftsmen
Yeah.
face. And I see my research as directly connected or directly
Mm.
having an impact on practice. So it's
Mm.
not only about making theoretical contributions,
Mm.
but it is also about making something or doing some research that can have an impact on the people
Yeah.
for whom this research is meant to be, who are the
Mm.
subject of this research.
Yeah.
So it's pretty
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you raise a very interesting point because you're talking about there's a conflict between the buyer. Sometimes they, as you said, they may not understand the delicacies, the issues, because I would assume that lot of these artisans, the craft makers, they are not producing in a mass level, and typically they probably employed few people or maybe themselves, like so making those big demand may not be very sustainable in a very short period of time, which I would guess a lot of time businesses want a large amount in a short period of time.
To add to that, David, because uh, you would notice that there is a difference in understanding of the craft.
Hmm.
And that's where my research focus is, that we need to understand what are the different types of craft.
Hmm.
And there could be
Yeah.
some crafts that cannot compromise on anything that is going into that actual traditional method of doing. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example which is closer to home where we are right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Take examples of the Cowichan sweaters.
Hmm.
Right, so Cochin sweaters that are made by the First Nation
Hmm.
and in traditional ways, using the traditional wool,
Hmm.
that is something that I would say that is very authentic
Hmm.
craft.
Hmm.
Now, how much can be changed? Can when the same sweater is made by the
Hmm.
same people but on a modern machine,
Hmm.
how authentic that would be?
Hmm.
Or if the same design language is being used, even
Hmm.
similar materials are being used, but it's made outside this place.
Hmm.
Now, what is the role of that place in that thing?
Yeah.
So that's what the interesting aspect for me is, that we need to understand craft not at a combining everything as just one bucket, but what are
Hmm.
the different types of craft, and how we can identify the different types of craft, and then
Hmm.
understand what are the things that can change in that particular category of the craft. And that's what I'm trying to build my research on.
You have proposed a stakeholder-centric configurational typology for your PhD. Can you explain why understanding different groups of stakeholders is important in a traditional based organizations like the artisan industry?
There has been a lot of work that is being done in on crafts, and it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
And now I'm so happy to see that there is a lot of research that is going into understanding the
Mm,
nature of the craft, how
mm,
the craft is different from art, how is it different from industrialized.
mm,
Honestly, I see it as a continuum where craft is somewhere in between. It's
mm,
not art and it's
mm,
not industrial production.
mm,
But then these boundaries are getting blurred all the time. What happens when you have this beautiful piece of Persian rug?
mm,
Now, crafts are supposed to have a utilitarian value.
mm,
Now, what happens then if you take that rug and put it on a wall?
mm,
Now it has become a piece of art now.
mm,
So the same product which may be considered as craft is now a form of art.
mm,
Or if you are practicing craft, but you are using some kind of innovation, some kind of technology in making those products,
yeah.
Are you not crossing the boundary from craft to maybe a little more industrial production side?
Yeah.
So these are the
Mm,
interesting tensions, and I
mm,
wanted to look. So there is a lot of research that has tried to understand craft in terms of the different types of craft or
mm,
different type of methods that are being used.
mm,
Look at, if you look at the UNESCO's understanding or definition of craft, it says that there has to be some element of use of hand in this thing,
mm,
right?
mm,
But then how about when somebody who is making those beautiful furnitures and things from resin on modern lathe machines and coming up with such beautiful pieces of craft? Now, is it
mm.
not craft? I
Yeah.
think it is craft.
Yeah.
So there is a whole spectrum what on craft, that there are things that has to be done in a certain way to
Mm,
qualify or to make it a particular kind of craft, and
mm,
there are different ways. Senate actually gives a very interesting has a very
mm,
interesting take on craft.
mm,
It says that even if a line of code
mm,
in a program, in an open source program, in a Linux program, is written in a way,
mm,
it is beautiful, it is concise, it does its job, it's functional, and it's a piece of craft.
yeah.
So anything, if you do a job well for its
Mm,
own sake,
mm.
it's craft. And that's a
Yeah.
very it's a very wide definition, right? That allows
Yeah.
us to bring in many different
Yeah.
um, practices and products into the definition of craft, and
Mm,
I like the definition. But at the same time, all the work on the craft had not looked at from, or I would say very little work has looked at from the stakeholder point of view.
mm,
And when I say stakeholder in the craft industry, these are producers, these are the consumers of the craft,
mm,
and these are the agencies that kind of certify, and these could be guilds.
mm,
Earlier, this nowadays we see governments
mm,
issuing different kind of certifications, right?
mm,
So a wool mark or something like
mm,
that. So
mhm.
these are the people who are giving or giving that product authenticity now.
Yeah.
So there are different stakeholders, but we don't know a lot about how the stakeholders look at the craft. So in my research, I'm focusing on producers, and I'm also focusing on the consumers. And when I dig deeper into this thing, I realize that the producers look at it from a very different angle,
Mm,
and the consumers look at it from a very different angle.
mm,
So I'll give an example. When
mm,
when the producers look at the craft, they are looking at from the culture, from the tradition, and
mm,
from the community point of view, from the identity point of view, right?
mm,
So, and for this reason, I treat craft as a category from the producer's point of view, where either they are looking at cultural aspects of it, they are looking at the process aspects of it,
mm,
or they are looking at the material aspects of it. So here, for a producer-centric view of the crafts, I'm using or I'm relying on the category centrality theory, which says
mm,
that if something is closer to that category, or towards more central to that category, that would have a better chance to be classified as belonging to that category. So if a product or if a quality is more immutable, that means it is more essential for something to be classified as a member of that category.
mm.
Take a very simple example for our listeners. If we think about a wheel,
Mhm.
what comes to your mind?
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
which is round, and
Yeah.
normally you would see spokes in it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but do you think what is more central? Having spokes in that wheel, or having it as a something which is circular, which is round?
Mm.
Well, the obvious answer is obviously it has to be round. We cannot imagine a square
Yeah.
wheel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say that roundedness is
Yeah.
probably closer for that particular object to be classified or categorized as a wheel
Mm.
rather than having spokes in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are two properties, but one is more essential, the other one is less essential. So from the category centrality point of view, when we connect it with crafts, I I think of it as either it has to be central in terms of process, it has to be central in terms of culture, or it has to be central in terms of the materials that are going into
Mm.
it.
Mm.
So I identify these three dimensions of centrality,
mm,
and try, rather than defining what a craft product or what a craft process is,
mhm,
I try to look at it from this angle that what is more craft? So something could be identified as more craft and something would be less craft. If you are further away from any of these dimensions,
mm,
probably you are less craft. If you
mm,
are closer, more towards the center of these categories,
mm.
you are more craft.
Yeah.
So rather than getting into these debates of what is art and what is craft and what is industrial,
Mm,
I think the way I'm approaching it, and that's what I would like to contribute to the literature
mm,
on this thing, is that you can identify something as more craft, something as less craft by using a category centrality point of view.
mm,
And from the producer's point of view, they need to understand what their craft is on these three dimensions.
mm,
If it is more a cultural craft,
mm.
there has to be a narrative that is built around that centrality. If it is more like a process, right? So a modern day craft work, which would not otherwise traditionally can be classified as a craft, but if they are true to the process, they are more central towards the process and the narrative for the
Mm.
authenticity needs to be woven around that centrality aspect. If it is closer to material, the
Yeah.
narrative has to be like that. So this is the basic idea behind this
Mm,
typology from the
mm,
producer's point of view.
mm.
But consumers don't look at it like that.
Yeah.
Consumers judge authenticity in a very different way. And
Mm,
for them, authenticity is uh, whether it fits their understanding of that product, right?
mm,
So authenticity has been defined in many, many, many different ways. Normally, when we talk about something being authentic, it comes to our mind that whether it's true, whether it's genuine, and whether it's real.
mm,
So if it's a painting, is it really the painting that was painted by that artist, or it's a fake? So
yeah.
normally that is what is attributed to the meaning of authenticity, but now we understand authenticity is a much more complex phenomena, which is more of a social evaluation. So your understanding of a product or a process could make it more authentic for you.
Mm,
So you would be looking at a very different that product in a very different way than someone who might not have that much idea about that product, and they would be looking for a certain different qualities or different aspects in that product. So from the consumer centric typology, I'm looking at it from the authenticity side, and I try to use Grayson's and Martinek's classification of authenticity, where they classify some authenticity as either indexical or
mm,
iconic. Indexical authenticity is something where something is what it claims to be.
mm,
If I say this is a painting by M.F. Hussain, it is a painting by M.F. Hussain.
mm,
That's it. It
mm,
gives it that indexical part of it.
mm,
If I'm saying it's a hand woven fabric, it is woven on handloom.
mm,
That makes it authentic. But then there's another aspect which is given, or the meaning that is given by the observer of that
mm,
object.
mm,
And that is iconic, which means that it is the observer's perception of that product, that if that product fits into that perception, it belongs to that category for them.
mm,
So, so there is a difference between how people who are more familiar with the product or
mm,
closer to that product or process would understand authenticity of that product, and people
mm.
who are either farther removed, maybe spatially, maybe
Mm.
temporally, they would have a very different meaning attached to the authenticity of that. So,
Yeah.
from consumers' point of view, it is important to understand how they are judging. That's where the social evaluations comes
Yeah.
in, the authenticity of the product. So
Yeah.
this is what I'm working on.
Very interesting propositions. So, how do you plan to conduct your research?
Initially, my idea was to go back to the research context that I was very
Mm,
familiar with,
mhm,
which was hand woven fabrics in India,
mm, mm,
and I had connections with the artisans.
yeah.
Having worked in that field for 8 years, it gave me a lot of, I would say, good understanding of the field itself.
Yeah.
But then I was also trying to look at other crafts where probably I might not know a lot,
Mm,
but
mm,
they present the similar kind of challenges.
mm,
And with Professor Ando, who is with Gustavson, I realized that sake industry in Japan
Mm,
is another very, very interesting context where there
mm,
is this constant struggle between something which is deeply rooted in tradition.
mhm,
Sake is part of the Japanese culture,
mhm,
and something that is very traditional, something is very craft, but at the
mm,
same time they are also facing a similar challenge, how they
mhm,
can market it, how they can grow this
mm,
industry as a whole. What are the different new avenues that have come up in recent
mm,
times, and how can their craft stay still be
mm,
relevant for them? So
mm,
this was the reason that I decided to look at the sake industry in Japan, and I'm
mm.
very happy that it presents all those challenges that I was looking for.
Oh, interesting. Quite a switch from the handlooms
Yeah.
to the sake. Very nice. Amit, can you share some of the exploratory work you have done for your PhD research?
Yes, certainly. So, because I didn't have, I would
Mm,
say rather, any idea about how this industry works and
mm,
what are the different tensions, or what are the different things that the craftsmen there are
mm,
struggling with,
mm,
or so I decided to take an exploratory trip to Japan.
mm.
I did it in November 2024,
Nice.
and we visited a couple of breweries there, but we picked the breweries from on a very broad spectrum.
Mm,
Breweries who are doing manufacturing of sake in a very traditional method,
mm,
a very smaller scale.
mm,
They were uh, they were using the methods that would be used traditionally in manufacturing of sake. But yeah, before even I go there, actually it is important to understand what sake is. Sake is
mm, mm,
an alcoholic product that is made
mm,
from rice.
mm,
And if you look at it, essentially there are three key ingredients. One is rice, the
mm,
other one is water,
mm,
and the third one is koji, which is it's a mold. It's a kind of mold that allows the fermentation and making of this drink sake.
yeah,
So traditional breweries use a method which is
mm,
using their knowledge of the product, of the production process, and they go about it in a very traditional way, in a very craft way.
mm,
And then there are breweries which are still maintaining those traditional qualities in that drink, but at the same time, they are using modern methods.
mm,
Then there was another brewery that we visited, which was taking it on a completely different level. But what I found was that all the makers or all the producers were
mhm,
using a very similar kind of language, which was the narrative was built around the craft, was built around the deep rooted tradition
mm,
in sake. So that was a common thread that was binding all of these things together. But at
mm,
the same time, the production processes were different, the
mm,
scale was different,
mm,
the target audience, the target markets were different.
mm,
So there was a lot going on there, and I felt that okay, this is probably a place where I would find very rich data, and that's
mm.
how I decided to finalize that as my research context.
Nice. Amit, did you get to sample lots of sake for your research?
So that is the best part of it, right? So I think your research context, which is really interesting, and actually it allows you to enjoy your research while you are doing research. So I'm fortunate to be being in a context which is sake. I honestly I get to taste a lot. So and I'm hoping that when I'm doing my data collection, I get to understand. I would put it like that. I get to understand sake a little bit more. So yeah,
I
of
think
course.
you're one of the few researchers where you can enjoy your own sample. You know what I
Absolutely,
mean?
literally as well. So yeah, no, definitely. But because I was surprised when we visited a couple of restaurants in Japan,
Yeah.
kind of this range of sake drinks that you get is
Mm,
amazing.
mm,
And there's a whole spectrum of in terms of how dry it is, or
mm,
whether it's sweet, how much
mm,
flavors. It's very similar to wine, but we don't
mm,
understand it a lot
mm,
about the sake industry. But
mm, mm,
it's a lot in terms of complexities. It's just
mm,
like wine. That's what I
mm,
felt.
mhm.
So Yes, of course.
Yeah,
I'm so looking forward to starting my data collection there.
very nice. What have you learned from your exploratory visit to Japan?
So I think, as I mentioned earlier, what I realized was that first thing, it validated my assumptions that
Mm,
crafts face different form of crafts face some challenges that are still common.
mm,
So I have an idea about one particular craft industry in India, which was facing a challenge, which was growth and authenticity challenge.
mm,
But I was really surprised, or kind of felt that I was going in the right direction when I saw similar challenges
mm,
in the craft industry in Japan.
mm,
Japan is a economy which is at a very different stage as compared to India.
mhm,
But the common thing is that in Japanese culture, crafts are very well respected, and
mm,
the people there place a lot of value
mm,
in their to the crafts that are coming from Japan,
mm,
and they are so proud of their culture.
mm,
So craft has it's a very thriving market, I would say. But at the same time, with all the demographic challenges in terms of they not finding the next generation of people who will
mm,
be willing to engage in those crafts,
mm,
or uh, so connecting to that point, which I just mentioned, in Japan, there is also this tension, which I didn't see it in India, which was that sometimes for them, even growth is not an option.
mm,
They are some of the crafts in Japan are not even willing to grow. They just want to maintain, and
mm,
they come from a very different ideological point on this thing. But it's not. So I think that they are different. I found different kinds of crafts in Japan. We visited other crafts as well, other than sake. But I
mm,
felt that there is still this question which is very relevant, is that there is a challenge between how do you the producers maintain this narrative of authenticity
mm,
while changing some of the things in their craft. And
mm,
that brings to the other question that I had, that how much can you change?
mm,
Still retaining the authenticity. So my visit to Japan kind of validated that I was looking at the right context there.
mm. Very nice. What are some of the expected implications of your research?
I think my research, I believe that it is a research where, and it also relates to where I'm coming from.
Mhm,
And I feel that as a practitioner, I have seen the real life problems that the businesses face. And working with the craftsmen in India, I could see those challenges firsthand. So it has always been my focus that my research should not only extend the literature on different or the theoretical aspects, but it also should be connected with the outcomes, or it
mm,
could benefit the practitioners.
mhm,
So I feel that my research I believe that my research could contribute to not only the theory on craft, because I'm proposing a new configurational typology of craft.
mm,
It could or it could add to the literature on craft. It could add to the literature on authenticity, and how it is socially constructed in craft industry, how the craftsmen build those narratives around authenticity, so that they stay relevant and they can grow at the same time.
mm,
So my my research, I expect it to contribute to not only the theory of authenticity and craft, but also impact the practitioners.
mm,
And as the examples that I gave you, right, the
mm,
challenges that are there in the field when they are struggling with this question that if you change a lot, you are not craft anymore.
mm,
So if the producers of the craft can understand what kind of craft they are practicing,
mm,
and they can, if they identify that, and they can build a narrative around that craft, that would be the language that would probably appeal the most,
mm,
and they would be able to understand the market dynamics, which normally, or which what happens is that they because they are so engaged in their craft, they don't understand. From
mm,
the consumer's point of view, there is this authenticity dimension, which
mhm,
is one part is the indexical, the other part is iconic, where it is the perception
mhm,
of authenticity.
mhm,
And if these two things can be combined,
Mhm.
The craftspeople can use this knowledge and build their craft around that. The
Mhm.
narrative could be built around making it more authentic,
Mhm.
and that's why they can grow and stay relevant with their craft. So I think it has both practical and theoretical
Mhm.
impact it could
Mhm. That's great. What's next for you, Amit?
have. I think PhD is a or doctoral journey is a long one, and
Yeah,
I look at it one milestone at a time.
yeah.
So I would be defending my proposal, the whole idea that we discussed today with my committee and
Mhm.
my external members of the committee. And then once that is validated, I'm looking to go out in the field and collect data. And I'm a qualitative researcher,
Yeah.
so qualitative data has its own
Mhm.
I would say challenges. It's not easy.
Mhm.
So I plan to spend some time in Japan with doing interviews
Mhm.
and visiting those breweries, sake
Mhm.
breweries, and
Mhm.
doing some participant observation as well, learning myself how the sake is made. I'll be
Mhm.
attending some workshops there,
Mhm.
so that I think that should be more would count as my participant observation. And then once I have this data, I'll start looking at the data and see
Mhm.
if the data that I get kind of connects with the theoretical propositions that I have, and I'll go from there. So
Yeah. Wonderful plan. Thank you for your time, Amit. Wishing you all the best in completing your PhD.
thank you, David. It was a wonderful conversation, and I really like the way you are taking the research out to your audiences and in a much simpler way, I would say, because sometimes we get lost into these academics words and the jargons, and it's so difficult to understand what really is happening. And I see your podcast tries to simplify things for the audience and so that it reaches more people. So thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. I really liked it. Thank you.